You're listening to Flight Plans, the SAE Aero Design Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the podcast, the first episode of 2018. This happens to be a special podcast for us here at the CDS team. Our longtime manager, Bob Sechler, is going to be retiring in just a few short days, so we asked him to come and join us for a conversation about what CDS has been like over the years, the good, the bad, the ugly, and maybe a little bit about his predictions for the future of CDS as we continue to move into a new time and place in the world. So I have with me Bob Sechler. I also have Sam Brill and Kaylee Zundel, who are the program managers for Baja SAE and SAE Aero Design, and then also Formula, SAE Clean Snowmobile, and SAE Super Mileage. So all of the series are represented here today. So they'll be chiming in. They've been with us the longest. So Bob's been here 35 years at SAE. Yep. Sam, how long have you been at SAE?
Going on 26.
Kaylee?
I think 18.
So there you go. We've got a lot of experience sitting at this table. So let's just get right into it. So, Bob, I was reading a little bit on the newsletter. We had an internal newsletter article go out about you, and it was a really interesting interview for me to read because I didn't know a lot of that stuff about the way CDS started in the early days. So how did you make your way to CDS itself? I know you came in from the advertising industry, which is a little bit of an interesting bent, and feeds a little bit of why we do the things the way we do here at CDS.
That's correct. I used to be advertising manager for a business newspaper in Pittsburgh, and someone came to me. I came to SAE. Well, I left the newspaper because I had young children, and it was a lot of doing business later at night, which I didn't think was very healthy. So I came to SAE, and I took a job in the exhibits division, developing, promoting exhibits, which used to be a big deal back then. It was a big money maker for SAE at the time. But while I was there, someone mentioned, hey, there's this new thing coming up you might be interested in. They're interested in getting more younger member involvement and more of a focus on student programs, student chapters, and student activities. So it came up, and I thought, well, it was a couple dollars more. So I took the job, left, which made my boss at the time, Art Weldy, very happy that I stayed for a year, working for him a year and a half. And I had no idea what I was getting into. It was assistant manager of membership and student development or something of that nature. They basically didn't know what it was either. But so that's how it all started. I was reading through materials, and I saw this thing, Mini Baja in Montreal next month. I had to go to that and see what that is. So I went to Montreal, and that's where it all began for me.
So what was that first Baja like for you? What did you see?
Well, I was pretty amazed, actually, because I used to race cars and motorcycles. So I was pretty intrigued by all the excitement and enthusiasm in these little off-road vehicles. And I guess at the time there were maybe 30 or 40 teams up in Montreal. And these things actually went in the water, too. They were amphibious vehicles. They were running water events. It actually started in 1973. Dr. Bill Shapton, he's at Michigan Tech now. He was at University of Cincinnati at the time. Started this program. It was called the Recreational Ecological Vehicle Competition. They had about 10 teams, and I think they did the first event down in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And then he, later on as the thing grew a little bit, he worked with John Stevens from Southwest Louisiana University to grow the program a little bit. I basically got in there and decided to grow the program a lot. And that was my intent. After I saw all the enthusiasm and the involvement by the schools, I thought this is a no-brainer here. And it's where we took off. I started doing the Team SAE Once You posters, like Uncle Sam type thing, because you went around engineering schools, you saw most of the literature at the time was two-color, cheap, really boring stuff. Then we had our big color poster over there with a Baja vehicle jumping over a hill got a lot of attention. Except for more information show up at this meeting. So our student ranks began to really boom. And then as they got popular, we made it a requirement that you had to be an SAE member to take part. So when engineering enrollments were going down, our student membership was growing by leaps and bounds because of the programs.
So you can all thank Bob for that requirement that you still have today, which is pretty cool that we still require membership as part of participation. So after Baja, that was the first competition that kind of started the Collegiate Design Series. Then where did we go?
Ron Matthews, who was Dr. Ron Matthews at the University of Texas at Austin, decided that he was going to start something called Mini Indy. And I think it was a 15 horsepower Briggs & Stratton engine. So that's pretty mini by today's standards. But they started that event, and I think they had it right on campus. I know the first one I attended was at Texas Arlington with Dr. Woods down there, and we had about 35, 40 vehicles right in school parking lots. If you can imagine that now. This used to be a school parking lot event, and it was based on autocross, SCCA autocross, running around cones, running against the clock. No wheel-to-wheel racing.
How did the programs transition more to kind of a design competition, the educational focus?
Okay, well, one of the things I did that was part of my job then was I had some committees. One was called the Accreditation Board for Engineering and Technology, which is the accrediting board for all engineering schools. You had to have ABET accreditation. ABET was pushing schools for more design in the curriculum, in the engineering curriculum, and more interdisciplinary team activities, those sorts of things. So it was a natural fit. Our programs, we designed and built them around the design requirements of ABET. So schools that didn't have a good bit of design didn't have to start from scratch to incorporate that into their curriculum, that they were able to go, oh, here's this SAE program, we can just use that. It's interdisciplinary teams, and it's design, build, test, everything they were looking for. So it was custom made to fit right in that slot, and schools really started taking up on registrations.
So then we added aero design into the mix.
That was started by a student. A student came to me and said, SAE writes more aerospace standards than anyone in the world. Why don't we have an aerospace competition? So I said, give me an idea. So he sent me a proposal. I called him back 2 days later. I said, let's do it. He said, when? I said, this spring. Let's throw it out there and see if anyone bites. And we got 15 teams to show up in Lake Giacomo, Missouri, and it was actually pretty funny, but we allowed, teams had suspension systems built out of surgical hose, and they would bounce like in 5-foot bounces into the runway and land. But that was a go, and it grew from there. And now we have, 3 classes and 150 teams. It's amazing.
So what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in the programs from when you started to now?
I mean, it's just keeping pace with the technology.
Yeah.
The programs were never about developing new technology, but, being an educational program, we want to expose teams and students to new technology and get them to work with it. So I think in the area of lightweight materials and the electronics, of course, we went through a series of things with alternative fuels, methanol, solar-powered cars, ethanol, liquid natural gas,
walking machine,
robotics. We had a walking machine competition for a while.
Let's talk about some of those competitions that are no longer a thing. Those are the ones that this generation of students don't even know about.
The walking machine competition?
Yes.
There was one thing missing from that, and it was called excitement.
Yes.
People would stand there on the edge of or sit on the edge of their seats waiting for this robot to take one step. And they would take a step and they'd applaud, yay, oh, that was great. That was the best step I've ever seen. And I went to this thing for about 3 or 4 years, and I thought, this isn't working. This just doesn't quite do it. It didn't lend itself, I think, to a student competition, although there's some people today that proved me wrong on that. But it just wasn't a fit for us, and the interest wasn't there. So we just got rid of it.
You were ahead of the game when it came to solar power as well. You ran solar power across this country, right?
Yeah, but that was pretty much a GM thing. They were running the World Solar Challenge in Australia, and they decided to do one here, and we were a partner. But, I mean, that was rough, 21 cities in 21 days.
Yeah. So what was the premise of that competition?
To transport a human being from Florida to Detroit on the power of a hairdryer.
Wow.
That was pretty, I mean, that's pretty spacey. And I mean, if we went through some fairly rural areas, and if you would see, I mean, you see these kids in their bare feet standing out in the cornfield, watching it go by. They probably thought we were Martians or something like that. I mean, it was pretty bizarre.
Were there any ideas that came across your desk that you wish you would have seen come to fruition?
We were approached by another organization about co-sponsoring a marine competition, but there's another, ASME does a lot of human-powered stuff, and I thought, okay, we were automotive, meaning self-propelled, so that did deal with human power, so I wasn't going to get involved in human-powered anything. It was motor-powered stuff. I can't say there were really a lot. There were a lot that came across my desk that I didn't want anything to do with it. I mean,
Yeah.
Some were great ideas. There was just no market, I think, for it. Like the railroad.
Railroad,
one.
that's just what I was thinking too,
That
the
one
railroad.
was really cool.
Yeah.
So that was actually it was proposed by a student who actually is part of the Baja Tech group.
Mhm.
And I honestly don't remember a whole lot about the concept of the competition because that was years ago that was proposed. But it was a really cool idea. The problem was there was absolutely no market for it. I mean, the railroad industry itself is fairly not a small market.
Limited, yeah.
It's a larger market that we don't know about, but it's limited for as far as uses.
Mhm.
But it was, the concept was taking a smaller kind of self-built box car that was going to be powered, it was a neat idea, but we all sat here and I think, Steve, Dom, he was the one who originally got the proposal. We kind of just said it's a great idea, but it's just not going to happen. There's just no way to make it come.
And there was
Right.
limited sponsors as well. There wasn't a whole
it was
big
just
market for some backing of it.
Yeah, we found it very difficult on how to push that kind of conversation or competition forward. And then we have had numerous different
rocket competitions.
Yeah, and we've had like the jet skis. Why don't we have jet ski competition similar to what the snowmobile competition is?
I'm still interested in that.
still
Think about that. Where would you have it?
somewhere warm.
Not bad.
Yeah. Where did you wish you would have had a competition? You never got the chance to.
Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
Ah.
Yep, that's what I thought.
Yeah, their faculty advisor down there promised me we'd
Yeah.
do one. Half of it would be on the beach and half would be in the rainforest.
Yeah, it was a bit of
Ah.
Baja.
And we
That'd
had
be kinda
plans. We
cool.
were going to ship all the vehicles over on a barge, but it just never came to fruition.
Well,
Yeah.
Hawaii and Manoa keep saying they host a Baja. Come on.
Same concept. Got to find a barge with all the teams and get them over there.
Go through the sugarcane
I'll be a
fields. It's
consultant.
okay.
I'll consult on that one.
But as a side note, a lot of what we're talking about, especially the history and Bob Sechler's beginnings, are highlighted in this coming month's Momentum.
Ah.
The newsletter Amanda referenced at the beginning of this will be repeated in the SAE Momentum, which goes out to all
All of you guys.
all
Yep.
student members. So if you're interested in getting it and reading it, it'll give you a different view, and it really shows you some of the history and some of the reasons why we do what we do. And it's a good read. Just thought I'd mention it real quick.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Sam. Yeah, it's really interesting, thinking about of all the competitions that we've passed on. There is a process that happens behind the scenes where we truly do evaluate all of the feedback. I think that's one thing that you have imparted on us as an entire department, is that customer feedback is key to success. It's something that you continue to read, even as you're winding down your career. You're still interested in what students are saying in the surveys and the feedback that comes from that. So where does that come from? I mean, you've clearly had success with that.
Advertising.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where it comes from. I had a little bit of background in advertising, and it's all about customer feedback, test markets, whatever. But
it's honestly one of the reasons CDS is a game changer, right?
We're lucky in a way. We get to spend 3 months with our customers every year.
Yeah.
Who else gets to do that? And they talk to us.
Yes.
And we talk to them. And faculty even talks to us too. I don't like to listen to it sometimes. But
Well,
you know who you are.
Yes, we do.
and a lot of, I mean, Kaylee and I, and Bob probably started this, but a lot of the people we're working with to help make these come true. In other words, going to a site, getting the volunteers, getting an organizer, they have come up through this program. And I think that's a real good lesson in many of them are hired by these sponsors. And these sponsors obviously want to get the best of the best. And these hands-on programs are one of the best programs in order to get a recruit with experience. They will offer their now employees the opportunity to come back and work with the program and be a judge, organize an event, or go out and recruit employees and recruit students from these programs. So I think that's important to note, that it's perpetual. I mean, we talk about it all the time where, the rules may or may not change for a particular event. Formulas change, Bajas changes, Aero Design certainly significantly changes every year. Super mileage and snowmobile also change. But in about 3 years, we've got a whole new set of customers. And so that's why it's important that we keep asking what they want. Bob had mentioned earlier about technology. Well, technology has changed. Bob's original design and idea was educating undergraduate engineering students, giving them basic hands-on approach. If I'm right, and I'm not talking out of turn, that's not typically the case now. Kaylee's got at least a couple events that are in the forefront of the technology. We have the auto drive that's coming up this spring that certainly is on the forefront. And so some of that has certainly evolved to make these events as popular as they are.
Well, I think also that when these things started going global, we found, and a lot of the teams started coming over here from offshore, especially Europe, they were graduate student projects.
Mhm.
Graduate students have a lot of time to spend on projects, so they raised the bar quite a bit on the technology and of the vehicles. So is it an even playing field? Probably not, but the whole world's not an even playing field. So we advertise these things as being a real world experience. So here it is. We used to get grief from students in Baja by saying all the teams from Mexico would win costs because they have lower labor costs. I said, go get your car fabricated in Mexico. I mean, it's that simple. It's you can't spoon feed people this stuff, and I mean that's part of the learning experience. Watch what they're doing, see how they do things. We constantly take new teams around to talk to successful teams that have embraced these programs and made them part of their curriculum, part of the way they teach engineering. Who the schools are. We take them around, and these kids find out, wow, this is really how you do it. And I think it's really helpful. the project management side of things, the scheduling and that. For years, I would go to Formula in Baja, and students are putting vehicles together in the backs of trailers, or just in pieces. They're just starting to put them together, and that doesn't happen as much. I'm not saying it's non-existent, but it just doesn't happen as much now.
Well, I
as it
think we
used
kind
to.
of helped that because now you can't even go to tech without a car being built.
Right.
Yeah.
Before we weren't as stringent as that, and now we are because the playing field has been raised so much. Students they don't have a choice but to come ready anymore.
I mean, there were some students basing their designs on what was laying around the shop.
Yeah, I
That's,
think.
well, we
yeah.
use this.
Well, and for all the you Baja guys, we are now adopting the cost module that Formula has been using for years. So don't listen to Bob. We've evened the playing field at this point. So we're all using the same cost at this point.
So, well, let's talk a little bit about like the craziest stuff you've seen. Teams showing up with their car in pieces. I mean, that still happens a little bit,
Yeah.
but not probably as much to that extent. The water event in Baja.
The water event in Baja, and some of the stuff we used to do there,
It's scary to think about now.
it is pretty scary to think about. I mean, I went to Montreal. We used to run the event around an old strip mine in Blainville, which is now condos, by the way.
Ah.
And we used to launch vehicles at full speed, which might have been 20, 30 miles an hour,
Yeah.
off about a 8-foot drop off into a lake where they'd totally submerge. Most of them came back to the top, and kept on going. Students would have to paddle them. We had hydraulic wheels that would lift up, and they'd run on a marine prop type thing.
I remember my first year, it was so cold, we had to mandate all the drivers have wetsuits just to drive endurance because it was so cold. Half the water had ice on it still.
Yeah. The
But
water
that was
event
part
was
of the event, yeah.
spectacular. I miss it, but
Yeah.
we deemed it
I got my foot ran over because of the water event.
too dangerous. But I've
Yeah.
seen a wooden Formula car
Ah,
made of wood.
do you remember the school?
I don't want to say.
Oh,
You can tell us afterwards.
But it didn't finish last.
yeah.
It didn't finish last.
It finished,
we saw,
right?
We saw Baja vehicles with, they used to run bicycle handlebars
Yeah.
3
on them,
wheels.
3-wheelers. We had a
Mhm.
6-wheeler.
6 wheels, I was going to
Yeah.
say.
6-wheeler that turned on a dime but didn't do much in the water.
It
They
was
couldn't
at
figure out how to make it
Montreal
go in
last
the
year,
water.
or not Montreal. It was at Maryland last year, 2 years ago. I don't know if you saw it at Maryland.
Oh, they
It was
brought it
part of our
down.
recovery vehicle.
Mm.
We said we
Oh,
had
nuh-uh.
we had the Bamula, which was University of Akron's hybrid Baja Formula car combined.
Yeah.
That's an iconic design over the years.
That's the one outside your office on a credenza.
Oh, yeah.
Boy, I'm trying to think when else. I remember the first turbo Formula car, and it was Marquette University in a little yellow car. It looked like a little yellow cap. And the acceleration run, the turbo kicked in, and the car just started spinning around 360s. Never made it to the finish line, but it spun around a lot. Another Formula car, University of Maryland, had the pleasure of running me over. When the turbo kicked in, the kid had the death grip on the wheel, and because the turbo has that lag from when you punch it down for when it kicks in, and they hit me.
Anything crazy from Aero Design or any of the other
Aero
competitions?
Design, Aero Design. We had a team from Milwaukee School of Engineering. I think they had a 28-foot wingspan.
Oh my gosh.
It was called the Worm Burner. It didn't get off the ground a lot. But they couldn't figure out a way to haul it, so they contacted a local cheese company and took a tractor trailer full of cheese down to Florida with their wing in the back end. And I had the unique experience of having a personal encounter with that plane because it did get off the ground. And I had to go to the porta potty. When I was coming out of the porta potty, everyone was staring at me and pointing up, and the thing was coming right towards the porta potty. It actually went over maybe about 3 feet over top of the porta potty, which is about 5 feet over my head, and crashed. It was interesting, things like that. I mean, Aero Design, the only one where we enjoy the crashes.
That is true.
I wasn't around for the beginning years of snowmobile when you guys were out in Yellowstone. But
Junction, Jackson Hole.
Jackson Hole.
yeah.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah, that may have been the best sight we ever had, getting to go into Yellowstone Park in the middle of winter before anyone was allowed in there. No tracks.
Yeah, so that was
Very
always
cool.
pretty cool to hear about.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good place to go.
What are some of the other memorable sites that we've been to?
Sites, memorable sites.
Did you go to a sheep pasture in California?
Oh, now there's a story. Dean Case. Some people may know him out there. He was at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He wanted to do a Baja out there. He became the first and last student organizer that we had, because it ended up costing him another semester of school. I don't think his parents were too happy. But I fly to California. We're having this Baja event. And I get off the plane and Dean says, I got to talk to you. The site, it was a motocross track in Santa Maria, said they want $5,000 or they're not letting us in. Well, I couldn't write a check for $5,000 at the time, so we decided we would call the university, and they gave us a sheep pasture. We actually had to herd the sheep out of the pasture, and we had a quad that we made a course on, and there were big rocks in here too. But it was so bad and so unsafe that we actually had the finish line came through the paddock area.
Oh my gosh.
To downhill. So I mean, but those were the days when people wear T-shirts and
Yep.
No wrist restraints,
Mhm.
no netting.
What about Baja 100?
That was a cool one. I like that site.
That was a very cool
I
event.
mean, that was one of the ones that Bob, at least under the impression, if it's changing, he can tell me now. I was under the impression that he brought me in specifically for that program at one point or another. Shannon had left. Shannon Hart, if any of you heard that name before, he had left. But Bob gave me all the responsibility, as Kaylee does, for the Lincoln on-site vendor responsibility. And Amanda mentioned water. And one of the things Bob wanted was every team should be supplied water. Well, in Arizona, where the event was held, you look up what the Army declares as sufficient water in that area. It's something like 8 ounces of water for every person for every half hour out in the sun. I think I rented a refrigerated tractor trailer with like 800 cases of water. And every morning, the student...
We had anniversary money.
Well, that was also the year that we mandated during endurance that drivers
That's
had
right.
to stop
Yes.
for water breaks. They
Yes.
had to stop and hydrate, which is not something we always do during events.
The good thing about it is there were places where you could run 6 cars wide
Mm-hmm.
on that with 150 yards straightaway. So, I mean, teams could go all out and actually race each other. What we didn't figure out, though, is when we put a tabletop at the end and then slow them down, they were flying the tabletops. And Baja vehicles, even though I know you students think they can fly, they really can't. They tilt over and roll. And we had a number of unfortunate incidents
Yeah.
out there, but we learned how to do tabletops at that time.
Historically, the Bajas run anywhere from the 4-hour Bajas that we currently have, run anywhere from 50 to 60 miles in those 4 hours.
Laps. Yeah.
Miles, total
Yeah.
miles. And this one was going to be 100 miles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the track Bob's referring to was a 2.5 mile track, and it was at least 30 feet wide almost everywhere.
Yeah, we had them do it pretty fast to get done in 5 hours.
It was a little over 5 hours.
But we averaged 19 and a half miles an hour
Something like that, yeah.
on it, but we got done on time. It was good. It was fun. I'd like to do it again. Oh, but I'm retiring, so.
So we're looking for an organizer in the Southwest area to
Yeah.
run another Baja 100.
Yeah,
2.0.
Caterpillar has a great facility out there, and our track's
Yeah.
still there, I understand.
Yes.
paging Martha Tress. So anything, any stories from the consortium days of Formula of that era? Not too long ago.
Well, that was interesting, but it was good. It was really good for Formula SAE. You know, we were having Formula SAE down in a parking lot at Texas Arlington, and a student, his name is Paul Allen. He was at Georgia Tech. Came to me after he graduated, and he went to GM, and he was working with Kenny Bernstein trying to set the drag race record, 300 miles an hour, whatever. And he called me and he said, you know, you ought to try and bring this event to Detroit. You know, Detroit needs to know about it. That's when the whole hiring thing started, when we realized, boy, what a great benefit to recruiters and human resources departments to bring this event to them. So he talked with the people at GM when we got Milford Proving Grounds, where we ran symmetrical formula tracks. But that's when things really started taking off, because we formed a consortium where GM, Ford, and Chrysler at the time supported this event every year for recruiting purposes. So we went from GM to Ford. Ford is where we got Carol Smith to come in, then to Chrysler. And then they decided, this is going to turn into a competition. So let's form this consortium and go to a neutral site. We went to the Silver Dome, the now defunct Silver Dome in Pontiac, Michigan, which was a good event for us. A good event for us for years. And we expanded the Baja to 3 events. And we could almost use another one for that, but you know, Sam's lazy. He doesn't want to do any more events.
So, what's the one thing you're going to miss about going to competitions?
Just the camaraderie. You know, as much as, you know, the faculty guys I'm always talking with, and that, just missing that and listening to them telling lies to each other. And, I mean, that was that's good. I miss that. I'd look forward to seeing those guys every spring. And I'd spend lots of time just going around the paddocks talking to each one of them. It's amazing how much you learn about your products and how you're perceived and ideas. And never in a million years could a million people satisfy all the faculty advisor needs.
Yep.
But
even with unlimited budget.
Even with unlimited budget.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you start getting a repeated message about an improvement possibility, we'd usually do it.
Yep.
We'd usually change something, and I think our customers realize that we do that. I think they trust us to do that. So that's been good. That's absolutely what I'll miss the most.
What do you think makes a CDS student different than a typical engineering student?
Practical skills, teamwork, teaming skills. I think they build confidence. You see many students start as freshmen, you know, cleaning wheels, clean the car up, find the nuts and bolts, go get me a wrench, you know, that kind of thing, to where they're a team leader. You know, as a senior, and, you know, I think employers recognize that. I had a vice president of one of the OEMs. I asked him once, I said, what do you think this experience brings to the table? He figured students that went through the program were a couple years ahead of his new hires that hadn't. In fact, one of the car manufacturers actually started a training program based on Formula SAE to give to those new hires that didn't have that experience. So that's a compliment in a way, that we did something right. We were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And we still are.
And we changed the face of mechanical engineering a little bit, I think, because everyone knows about these programs now. It's hard to go around an engineering school and not find one of these vehicles or a trophy, or they know what you're talking about. Probably because they spend a lot of school's money.
What about the future?
Future.
Bob
Any
says-
predictions?
Bob's going to say that's for us to decide.
Yeah, I
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, I know.
Next.
No, it's well, I mean, everyone, autonomous vehicles.
Yeah.
That's certainly going to come into play. Cybersecurity, electric vehicles. I mean, you're starting to see that now. I mean, no one thought Tesla was going to be around, and here they are, still around. There's a big push for electric vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are all over the place now. So I think that's how it's going to change. You know, the fact that the technology changes, but I think the collegiate design programs, since they, to me, are still greatly a project management exercise. And you can use project management skills you gain in this on just about anything you do. So no matter what the technology is, I think if it becomes a CDS program, it'll sort of use the same basic format. You know, design, build, test, like the autonomous vehicles. I don't know if we'll get to the point of designing our own ground-up autonomous vehicles. Maybe. I would say, yeah. You know, maybe at some point. That's a little scary thinking about right now. But I think the auto industry knows that we are a training ground for their future engineers. And I think we need to be responsible enough that we're training them on what they need to know when they're going into that industries. And I think that you'll see that through our design programs, through specified training programs. So I think that will be the big change, but we're still selling out. Sponsors are still interested. Young people are getting hired out of these programs right and left. So all is good. I think the future is bright for CDS, because the people that were in CDS are now going to be hiring. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, it all comes full circle, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and they become tech inspectors too.
Yep, they do. Yeah, I mean, honestly, you've seen quite a few generations kind of circle back around and eventually move back out of the program. So that's got to be cool to see people coming back that you knew as students coming back, getting into the programs.
I just met a guy a few weeks ago. He was here for a board of directors meeting. I met him as a student at Wisconsin. And Wisconsin at the time didn't want to have the Baja program. And he said, well, I'm doing it anyways. And he pushed that thing through, and he became very successful with the program, and then the school embraced it. And he's back here now. He owns his own company. He said that program taught him how to be an entrepreneur, because he had to sell the idea. He had to go find money. He had to build it. He had to test it. You know, he had to sell it to a panel of judges. He said it's everything he's doing with new product development in his company. So it's has multiple uses. I had a human resources manager from EI DuPont once tell me that he was in Baja. And I said, what were you doing in Baja? He says, I was a team manager. He said it was the best experience he ever had. As in just the dynamics of the team and handling the problems and, you know, smoothing things out and dealing with people issues.
Well, we had that, I don't know if you want to name the school, but Dan Dolan over at South Dakota brought his psychology major
Yeah.
to the formula team. And when I asked what her responsibility was, she had meetings daily with the team captain and the stress levels and how each team member handled and adjusted to whatever was going on that day. I remember that was her master's thesis.
That's been a big change too. When you were asking about changes before, big change. It used to be engineers, just engineers. You had to be an engineer to be on this team. And the students finally came to me and said, hey, engineers don't just work with engineers anymore. So we opened up student membership. So you have all sorts of majors. You need someone to raise money, go get a marketing major. Mm-hmm. A business student to run your finances, or a finance student that psychologist for team manager. So what they're doing is like running a little company.
Yep.
Right now.
Well, I remember when I first started here, membership used to do that youth leadership seminar or something. It was called like that. And there always used to be a presentation about that for CDS programs, about how it doesn't have to just be an engineer, because these programs are like a business. And so a business requires everyone to be in to run it. So I think even that that was back in 2004, 5, 6 that I remember those. And even that was when we started seeing some of the progress of the teams really raising the bar back then.
I think you see more women on teams now
than
there used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly the global presence.
That's definitely a big change,
Yeah, it's widely known globally
Yeah.
now, and I think that's been good.
Well, any final words, Bob? Any advice to CDS teams?
Start early. Don't get in trouble breaking into the shop late at night. I'll be back out there to see everyone. It's been a joy for me to work with these programs over the years. I couldn't have asked to do something I enjoyed more. So keep up the hard work, and we'll see you out there, maybe not this year, but maybe next year.
Thanks for listening to Flight Plans, the SAE Aero Design Podcast. As always, we want to hear from you, so email aerodesign@sae.org. The show notes for this episode and all others can be found at aerodesign.fireside.fm. Stay safe, and we'll catch you next episode.